Okay, you're very welcome to the Let's Talk Pigs Teagasc Pig Development webinar. And this is the final in our series. And today we're hosting Charlotte Lauridsen, Professor Charlotte Lauridsen from the University of Aalborg. She's a professor in experimental nutrition. And her main areas of work would be around the area of nutrition research in relation to gastrointestinal health and disease in both humans and pigs. I suppose her primary area of research will be nutritional immunology and infection biology. She's currently the project leader of a study titled Born to Gut, which looks at the effects of supplemental milk for suckling pigs and seeing how that impacts on the pig with the aim of reducing antibiotics through an improved gut health. And Charlotte has done an amount of research on the whole area of supplementary milk in the farrowing room, and I know this is an area that's of interest to a lot of us here in Ireland, as we see numbers of pigs produced increasing year on year. So over the course of the next half an hour or so, Charlotte will facilitate us with her presentation on her work to date. And then Michael McKeon here, colleague in the Teagasc department, will facilitate the questions. So I can just remind you there that at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the question answer or the chat option, and you can put your questions in there as Charlotte is presenting, and Michael will facilitate the question and answer session at the end. So over to you, Charlotte, and you're very welcome, and thanks for talking to us today.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation to talk today. So as you can see, I'm working both with human and pigs, but today I'm fully focused on the pigs, and I'm going to talk to you about supplementary milk in the farrowing room. So what I'm going to talk about is why should we actually supplement milk to the suckling piglets? Furthermore, when and how should we apply the milk? What kind of milk supplements are we thinking on? And then finally, I'm going to share some of my own research concerning supplementary milk. However, I'm not really going to talk about which supplementary milk equipment could be used. There are more equipments available. And also, I'm not going to talk about the economical aspects regarding implementation of the equipment or, costs of the milk and so forth. So first of all, why should we actually use supplementary milk? Well, we have, as you're all aware, hyperprolific sows. And they are really giving a lot of piglets, and maybe they will continue to have even a higher number of piglets within a litter. And the bottom line is that there are often more piglets than functional teats. So what the farmer has been doing is really cross-fostering, and I know, at least from the Danish farmers, that there will be a lot of movements of piglets around during the whole suckling period. And also, there has been a lot of many nursing sows, therefore, we have been thinking, so supplementary milk, that would actually provide the sow the opportunity to foster more of her own piglets. Furthermore, supplementary milk, that's also a way to equalize the milk quantity. As you can see in this figure, which is now showing you the milk production in kilo per day during lactation, and the lactation now is here continuing until day 40. But we can see that already in week 2 of the lactation, you can see that the sow is not increasing her milk production further. And supplementary milk would therefore be a possibility to diminish the sow's negative energy balance during the lactation. So she's simply using a lot of her body reserves and put that into milk. And this creates a negative energy balance, but by supplementing milk, you can actually have a sow which is in better condition, and that will actually also improve the sow's reproductive performance. So another thing is now, when we see it from the piglets point of view, that there is not a limitation in the growth potential of the piglet in week 2. So this is why you can see a lot of other countries, especially in Denmark, we don't really do it, but they started using early weaning. But actually here, supplementary milk would be a way not to limit the piglet's growth, because it is kind of utilizing its potential for further growth by supplementary milk. So we know that these hyperprolific sows giving a lot of piglets, we have a big challenge with the piglet mortality, and we are having the problem with heterogeneous litters, and this is actually also a problem at weaning, because such a litter with a lot of piglets, well, the piglets are less uniform. And we can again use supplementary milk to enhance the weight gain of piglets during the suckling period. And overall, we could then have less piglets dying. And overall, this would be a good thing for the farmer, because we will then be able to increase the number of piglets at weaning. So I would just like to underline that this piglet mortality, we were addressing that in a review, and you can read in that further yourself. But of course, the problem really appears if the birth weight of a piglet is really low. We know that it causes a higher risk of mortality, and this is because it takes time for such a little piglet before it maybe gets to the udder. And also, when you are so small, there might be a big challenge with the body temperature. And the problem is that a piglet is really born without any fat reserves. So it is really a challenge for it in the very beginning to have a high enough energy. It means it really has to get to the udder immediately. And the higher the birth weight, the better chances there is for actually survival. Another thing I would like to stress here, maybe it's a bit difficult to see with the black letters, but I'm going to show this slide because, as you remember from the former speaker, Jan Hansen from Denmark, he was also addressing the challenge with the high consumption of antibiotics in the swine production. And what you can see from this figure here is that it is, or the majority of the antibiotic usage in the swine production is actually used because of the weaned piglets. So we are talking about 85% here. And this is really used because the weaners, they have problems with gastrointestinal diseases. And this increases the veterinary microbial usage, and it increases the risk of antimicrobial resistance. And during the first 14 days post-weaning, at the moment we can use high levels of zinc in the form of zinc oxide, but as you probably are aware of, there is a ban from the EU from year 2022, And it means that we really have an urgent need for alternatives to zinc oxide. Otherwise, it may probably cause an even higher consumption of antibiotics. And what I have done during my research and together with colleagues is really to focus on when should we start those dietary interventions which could maybe prevent post-weaning diarrhea. And the more we do the research, the more convinced I am that we have to use these dietary interventions as early as possible. So again, this means that using supplementary milk would actually be an opportunity to start these dietary intervention already during the suckling period. So just to put in some of some research here, what do we know about reducing piglet mortality via supplementary milk? Well, there are international experiments published which have shown that when we have litter sizes of 12, you can actually reduce a piglet mortality with up to 4.2 when you supplement milk. And also we have a Danish study showing a marked reduction of piglet mortality at litter size of 14 with use of milk cups. And yes, as I said again, on the bottom line for the farmer, it means that less piglet mortality means higher number of piglets at weaning. Another thing is that these and those experiments being published showing the increased weight gain, that's more or less the same as with the piglet mortality. And these experiments have shown an increased weight gain at weaning from between 52 to 1.79 kilo per piglet with the use of milk supplementation. And this has also been confirmed in this Danish experiment with the use of milk cups. So I don't doubt that milk supplementation, it can actually increase the weaning weight. But what I'm more interested in from a research perspective is also whether it's possible to influence the growth of the piglet post-weaning, and especially the robustness of the piglets. And here I'm thinking on really the robustness in terms of preventing the occurrence of diarrhea and infectious disease and so on. So I would like to stress that it's really a balance here. We know that the breeding is going towards really higher, maybe even further increase in the number of suckling piglets. And it's really, so what are you aiming at? Would you like less mortality and higher weight gain? And overall, I think this is where there is a big role for the milk supplementation during suckling. So, so far the conclusion can be that the milk supplements can enhance the sow's capability of fostering more piglets. It also means that we don't have any less movements of piglets among the farrowing units, meaning that there is a reduced risk of spreading disease and disturbances while the sow is now taking care of her piglets. So overall, less piglet mortality, improved piglet weight gain, and higher numbers of piglets. And this is really what you obtain when you have the milk supplements. The next question now is, when should we then apply milk supplementation? And this is, again, I can only say, well, there are more strategies. Typically, two mixtures are used during the suckling period, from farrowing and until day 10 to 14. There is a so-called start mix, and thereafter you can introduce with a mixture 2 or even a mixture 3 until the end of the suckling. But I really think that this transition, it depends a lot on what is actually the milk supplement content and also its composition. And if or what kind of milk supplement should we actually use? And here I would say, let's ask the pigs. If we now think about the sow and the sow milk, well, we know that due to genetic variation between sows, there is also a variation in the milk composition. And also there is a huge variation due to the physiological status of the sow. Is it parity 1, 2, or further? We also know that it is somehow possible to influence the milk composition of a sow by dietary intervention. And I'm really interested in the fatty acid composition of the milk by sows, and I know that if I'm feeding various fat sources for the sow, this will also be reflected in the milk composition. However, we are also now aware that there are really environmental and seasonal influences regarding the sow milk composition. So one major question is now, is the sow milk composition optimized for the large and heterogeneous litters? And here let's take a look on the piglets. Well, we know that there is a huge physiological variation within a litter. And I would actually say that some piglets, when they are born, they are not ready to be born. And you can imagine that when we have these large litters, that there are some piglets, they are ready to be born, and they can really, they are strong enough to suckle the sow and get a lot of milk. But there are also small piglets, and they are underdeveloped. So already here, there might be a different demands depending on this physiological status of the piglet. So again, there are individual demands. Some piglets may actually need specific additional supplements for optimal growth and health development. And again, it might be that there are some of the stronger piglets, they could easily cope with a milk supplement, already the mixture 2, when other piglets would need mixture 1. And maybe everything here depends on whether you are whether the piglet is born with a high or a low birth weight. I don't know so far. So in order to summarize here, I would say that we should really be aware that there is no such milk supplement which can replace the sow milk or colostrum. And we know that the sow milk composition, it varies during the lactation. And as for human babies, there might be several milk formulas available on the market also specified for piglets, and they can be enriched with different macronutrients at different levels, but also different levels of micronutrients, vitamins, trace minerals, but also bioactive substances such as milk oligosaccharides, probiotics, and so forth. And some of these enrichments of the milk formulas, they are very interesting when it comes to could we do something in order to prepare the piglet for weaning? So again, focusing on the post-weaning period as well. So I just wanted to show you this figure because it's actually from an old study, but I think it contains this study a lot of information on the variation of the sow milk composition during the suckling period. And here you can see that just if we take a look on the dry matter and fat content in sow colostrum and milk, you can see that this actually varies not only on a day-to-day basis during the suckling period, but also from hour to hour, meaning that there is, in my eyes, specific needs for the piglets or demands at various times during the suckling period. And the reason I'm focusing on this also is that remember that the apparent fat digestibility by the suckling piglets is really high. It has been reported 96%. So it means that the fat in the sow milk is really also used by the piglets. Let me now go into some of my own research, but because what we did for some years ago now was to compare sow milk, bovine colostrum, and milk replacer. And this was because we wanted to go more into detail about the biological value of bovine colostrum. Could that actually be a good thing to give to the piglets? In this experiment, we used piglets which were 23 days old, and we had then the interventions which were the milk-based diets in the form of bovine colostrum or milk replacer, and this was just an ordinary milk replacer from the market. But also we decided to let some piglets stay with the sow. And of course you can't directly compare the sow milk now with the other dietary treatments. But what we were focusing here on was really that we thought that bovine colostrum was better substitute than milk replacer, and also that it influenced the microbial community in these piglets. And here you can just see that there is really a huge difference between bovine colostrum, milk replacer, and sow milk when it comes to the dry matter, the crude protein, the fat content, but also, and this was what we were focusing a lot on here, the content of immunoglobulins. And maybe, so could bovine colostrum now be a good idea to use in the very beginning of the suckling period? Yes, I think because this would actually provide the piglet with some of the very important substances, the immunoglobulins. So the only result I'm going to show for you from this experiment was that we did see a difference between these dietary interventions. So our milk replacer and bovine colostrum, they did not differ in terms of the body weight of the piglets at weaning, at day 30 after birth. And actually you can see that the sow milk, the piglets suckling the sows, came out better than either of these two groups. But again, there could be several factors coming into this, not only whether it was sow milk, milk replacer, bovine colostrum. But one thing you should now see is that here in our experiment, the milk replacer actually also caused a higher diarrhea incidence rate. And it's not that easy to explain. Why did we see this? Because the bovine colostrum and the milk replacer was actually provided via the same type of equipment. So could it again be due to the fact that we had these immune substances in the bovine colostrum and not in the milk replacer? Okay. So another thing is what are we doing now in this bone to gut study, which we are currently carrying out here in Denmark. It's part of a huge initiative by the authorities, the ministry here in Denmark. And the overall purpose is really to reduce the use of antibiotics in the swine production. So what we are trying to do here, and this is a really novel things to do, but what we do is to study the influence of additional milk supplementation from day 3 to 12 after birth. But then what we do is to introduce the so-called liquid feeding, meaning that from day 12 until weaning of the piglets at day 28, we start continuously to add creep feed in the liquid form during the suckling period. And the reason for doing this is that we have discussed that post-weaning, it is somehow a shock for the piglets, seen with our eyes, that it is coming from eating a lot of, or maybe only getting feed in the form of sow milk, and suddenly it's left there, and it has only the chance to get creep feed as a solid feed. And the thing is that a suckling piglet, even though it is getting creep feed, there is a huge variation within a litter whether or not they have eaten creep feed when they are weaned and how much they have eaten. So we were thinking, let's now, with this equipment, and this was possible with the equipment we have in our facility, to provide the so-called liquid feeding. Another thing we do in this research project is to study the influence of 2 different weaning ages, day 24 versus day 35. And we do this in order to study the overall influence of our dietary interventions and then our weaning ages on piglet growth, performance, and immunity and health. So what are we looking for? We are measuring a lot on these piglets because they are not even divided into these dietary interventions and weaning age treatments, but they are also divided into low birth weight, a middle birth weight, and high birth weight, and whether or not they have eaten colostrum, or maybe they have received very little, maybe they have received some, and so on. And we are trying to characterize each piglet on the basis of these characteristics, and then we are going to follow them by studying performance of the piglets both before and after weaning. And we take out a lot of samples from these piglets for studying immune responses, microbiota responses, and then the general health. But also we are studying the eating behavior of the piglets. Who is actually drinking our milk supplements, our liquid feeding? What are they drinking, and when are they taking this supplementary feed? And I would say that so far we We do not know, this is an ongoing project, but it's not reported in the literature that it is, for instance, always the small piglets who would try to get some supplementary feeds or milk. It can also be the large piglet which has already finished the meal at the udder. It is running towards the next serving. So this is for us a huge interesting research purpose to see what is actually going on with regard to the variation within litters, and can we then in the future start to increase the piglet's robustness prior to weaning, and will we then overall reduce the use of zinc oxide and antibiotics post-weaning? So at the end, I would like to come with some take-home messages and perspectives. I think it's clear that supplementary milk replacer can improve piglet weaning weight and reduce piglet mortality. It can also provide the piglet with additional nutrients and additives. Will it have positive effect on litter homogeneity? Can we influence gut function, microbiota composition, function of the microbiota, and immune responses? And is it overall also a strategy to enhance piglet robustness post-weaning? So I hope to be able to present these results when we get closer to the end of our research project. So with this, I think I will end my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Okay, thanks very much, Charlotte. That was a really interesting presentation, and we look forward to the questions and answers. Now, just to remind you, you can put your questions and answers in through the Q&A option there at the bottom of your screen, and Michael will facilitate those. Well, I'm sure there'll be plenty of interest also in the final outcome of your Born to Gut project, so we'll be watching that from a distance and looking forward to the results of that. So thanks again for the presentation. So I'll just hand over to Michael there now for the Q&A.
Thanks very much, Ciaran. Mailbag here has been very busy. First question from Shane. You mentioned an increase in the weaning weight from, I think it was from 0.5 kilos up to 1.8 kilos. But the question is, how much of this weight gain has been in the bottom 50% of pigs that had a low birth weight? So if you're using the milk cups to increase your weaning weight, it may be for the small pigs. How much this weight, how successful is milk cups for increasing the weight gain of piglets with a low birth weight?
Yeah, and this is a very good question. And I would say again, this is exactly what we are going to study also in our Born to Gut project. Because what I referred to, these international publications and so on, it is extremely difficult to follow every piglet within a litter. So there is a lot of work to be done if you are doing this, but we are trying to doing it by video recording of the piglets at certain time points during the suckling period. So I'll be able to answer that later, yeah.
And from your experience though, of the literature, do you know for piglets that were born under 1 kilo, are milk cups successful for those piglets from what you know to date? Obviously your trial will tell you a lot more, but to date, from what you see in the literature.
Yeah. Now, I also showed you this figure where I had shown, so the lower birth weight, the higher risk of mortality due to these factors of low body temperature and so on. And I may also say that unfortunately, a lot of piglet mortality is especially taking place also in the very beginning of the suckling period. So there might be piglets which we lose at a very early stage. So again, it's difficult to say exactly who are we going to lose. And I, again, what we know here in Denmark is also that, okay, if you had kind of an individual treatment so that you could take these piglets and make a special treatment for them, maybe that would help. But it's very difficult on a general basis to say, well, if you just make, or if you just serve milk cups, they would be able to benefit from those, because it really also is a matter of introducing these milk cups, and they should learn to get to these milk cups. And this will maybe, I said from day 3, but because it's important they have colostrum in the very beginning. But you know, it's a gradual process. So you may have lost some of the low birth weight piglets already before.
Okay.
They don't get to know, yeah.
Okay, very good.
That
Okay,
was a long answer.
No, bro. No, I understand completely. Another question from Mick. He says he has used milk cups in the farmhouse from birth onwards, but had a huge scour problem with the piglets, even though the hygiene was excellent with the milk cups and the feeding system. Can you comment?
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know about this. Actually, I can tell you in our Bone to Gut project that our concern was more having these piglets with the sow for 5 weeks, because we know that this can be very harmful to the sow. So we have this intervention without milk supplementation. So, but what you are saying now, is it the piglets which are actually being harmed by fighting each other, or
is there any risk that the piglets are taking too much milk, whereas with a sow it's released on an hour every hour, whereas with the milk cups they may be ingesting too much too quickly?
That's a good question. I'm afraid I'm not
That's okay.
able to answer that. Yeah,
that's okay. Your research may find out these answers. What should you be looking for in a milk replacer? This comes from Shamey, and I've another question as well from Ricardo. I'll add it into that. Has probiotics been used in supplementary? So what are you looking for in a good milk replacer and in milk supplement, and are the ones using probiotics?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. We have another ongoing experiment here, a PhD study, and we have in this study had a very early inoculation of probiotics of the piglets. So it means almost immediately as they are born, they receive inoculation of probiotics. And this is because we know that in order really to make a difference, we should maybe do it before the microbiota is starting to be established. So I would say that at the moment we are not there where we can come up with a lot of published studies where they have added probiotics to a milk formula and given that to the piglets. At the moment we are there where people who have researched this is really inoculating the piglets or treating the sow, because we want to make sure that the piglets are also receiving the probiotics, and that you don't rely on whether or not they're drinking milk formula already in the beginning of the suckling period.
Okay. I have another question. It's related to it, what is the best age do you recommend for using iron injections, and is there a role for oral iron during the suckling period? I don't know if this is something you've come across.
Oh no, I won't be happy to give that kind of guidelines. I mean, very often what you do with iron injection is really while you are castrating. Now, I am aware that you don't castrate pigs in Ireland, am I right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We don't.
But we are, you know, still doing this. So so often this is also, you know, a strategy of management. So doing two things at the same time, maybe.
Okay. I have another question. You mentioned milk replacer. Is this a calf milk replacer? And is there also any problem feeding fresh milk? So obviously somebody with a dairy herd as well, they're asking, is there an issue feeding fresh milk to piglets? And is calf milk replacer an option?
Well, that's also a very good question. Yeah, why not? You could say, but I don't hang me up on this because I think we should study that. So you could see in our experiment we use bovine colostrum.
Mm-hmm.
Fresh milk, again, take care that you don't start to introduce any pathogenic bacteria.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also I would say, if you start to do this, one challenge is to implement an equipment where you can make sure that it doesn't pollute the tubes, and that, you know, what you actually provide the piglets is a drink with a lot of pathogenic bacteria.
Yep. Okay.
So I would say again regarding the fresh milk, that this can also be an issue, of course.
Okay, the hygiene on it. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question here from Lar. He says, you have shown that there's an increase in the weaning weight, but do you also need to use the milk cups for the first few days after weaning? Otherwise, are you going to lose any gain that you gained in your weaning weight? So obviously you're using milk cups in the farrowing pens, but when they're weaned, then if there's no milk cups, are you going to have severe weight loss?
Yeah, and I would say you're absolutely right, because we have major focus on the very beginning of the post-weaning period. So our strategy with the bone to gut was really to say, well, if the piglet is getting adapted to, you know, slowly eat more liquid feeds, maybe it will also be able to consume more of the feed immediately post-weaning. Whether it's from a practical point of view possible to leave the piglet in the farrowing unit and remove the sow, and then you could say, well, let's just continue with some milk. I think that could actually be a good idea. But
Okay.
I would need, from being a scientist, that this is more, I need to go into literature to say, is this actually also well documented from a scientific point of view?
Okay. Okay. Sean asks, you referred to fat sources and the effect it has in the sow's milk. Can you just expand a little bit on that?
Yeah. So I know that one of the major differences within milk formulas for human babies, that would actually be the fat source. And often what is introduced might be vegetable fat, might be various fat types. There are also human literature where they have introduced the longer chain polyunsaturated fatty acids in order to influence brain development of these babies, and this has actually been carried out using also pig as model for human. So I think that there is a big a good potential in looking for maybe what is the best fat source to provide the piglet with if you're going to use milk formula.
And you're looking at medium chain versus long chain.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And the fat level going into the sow's diet, is that less important than the source of fat?
I would say that it's not that easy to increase the level of fat in the sow's milk. I know that it has, during the last 30 years, the fat level in sow milk has actually increased from maybe 6.5% to 7.5%. But from my own experience, I would say that it's more the fatty acid composition of sow milk we are able to change to some point of level. But of course, if you now assume that a piglet would always drink the milk formula, that would really be a huge potential in start to manipulate with these fatty acids. Yeah.
Okay. Have you found, this is a question from Lisa, have you found a problem where you're using milk cups in a farrowing house that the piglets will drink from the milk cups a lot more, and therefore that will affect the milk production of the sow?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I don't. Honestly, I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Then it requires that you start to say, well, there is a sow, it is not providing milk, and then it's extremely difficult to start to investigate, I would say.
Okay.
But interesting question, yeah.
Is the weaning weight gain affected by how the milk is provided? So can it be a manual system, or must it be an automated system?
Well, at the moment, I think we are talking about automatic systems. Yeah. Think about that. If you, I mean, honestly, you should try to feed the milk formula several times a day. Mm-hmm. Yep. It should be, I mean, a piglet needs regular milk throughout the day. And I think actually this should be served also when the sow is providing milk herself. Yeah.
Little and fresh. Okay. What would you recommend, just in your own experience, at what level that your born alive goes to, do you think you would have an advantage of using milk cups in the farrowing rooms?
Oh, please, could you?
Sorry. At what level of the sows born alive, so at what level of the average born alive do you think there is an advantage from using milk cups? So I presume if you're born alive is 11 or 12, there is no issue with it, but at what level do you believe that it's advantageous to start using milk cups?
Yeah, I can tell you that in our bone to gut experiment, we decided to have one more piglet than teats. So it's really a matter of functional teats, isn't it? Okay. So that is a bit difficult to answer, because I also know that there might be a variation among sows whether or how many teats are available. So if we take on a general basis that, well, it depends on that, the number of born piglets, and then they should, I think, have one teat per born piglet, and if not, I think it could be a good idea to introduce the milk cups. Yeah. Okay.
We have a couple more questions, but you've kind of covered most of the ground that they're asking. So maybe I'll hand you back to Ciaran.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Thanks for that, and thanks for Charlotte. Plenty of questions there, which is always a good sign, and it's great to get them coming through. So I'll just conclude the webinar now. I'd just like to thank once again a few people. So firstly, obviously thanking Charlotte for an excellent presentation and a great Q&A there with Michael, so appreciate both your efforts there. Also behind the scenes, Orla Canan in the pig department are here herself, Michelle Lavelle in the Connected department, and Alison Maloney in PR for the promotion and marketing of the webinars. I'd like to thank yourselves for attending today's live webinar. Appreciate that, and also through the series here up until now. The previous presentations and live recordings are now available on our website, and the recording and presentation from Charlotte today will be on our website early next week. So that basically concludes it. As I say, thank you for your attendance. Concludes the current series. We will be looking at doing something online for our pig conference, which normally happens the 3rd, 4th week in October, but because of COVID we won't be doing the face-to-face option this year, so you can keep your eyes on this area for an online version and something different for this year. So once again, thank you. Have a good weekend, and thanks again to Charlotte.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye.